It's time for another episode of the Cultural Hall, and this is a temple ticker episode of the Cultural Hall. Now, this may be your first time listening to the Cultural Hall, and you're like, I don't know what a temple ticker means. Well, we have the foremost not called by God authority about temples of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He researches them. He Google Earths them. If he could afford it and it was his job, he would go to every single one of the places that we're talking about so that he could give you a firsthand experience. It's the Pharaoh himself, Corey K. Ward. Thank you for being here and talking temples with me.
I'm flattered, Richie.
Yeah, I feel like I'm right though. I mean, outside of those that's like this is their job and or they're called and ordained. I mean, it's you.
Yeah, there's a few people that do that where they try and go visit every temple.
Yeah. A previous guest of the Cultural Hall, I haven't spoken to him since we had like the big boom in temples. Scott Jarvie goes and takes pictures of them. He's a photographer. I don't know that he is still doing that with all of the temples because we have so many now. But once upon a time, I think he even released a book, and that's why we talked with him, where it was just beautiful temples. All of the temples at that time, but I think that was like when there was
100.
There was like 2 digits. Oh, the old days. It's wild for me as I was looking at the notes that you prepare. And by the way, people can check them out in our show notes. You can also find them where we post them on our YouTube. Yes, I said YouTube channel, where you can see Corey K. Ward's fantastic sweater, but you can read and follow along and click links and go to all the places. And if you want to try and be the next Pharaoh himself, I mean, good luck is basically what I'm saying, but you can follow all those show notes. When I was looking and saw that Okinawa, which is where I know you want to start today, is the 186th, I'm excited because that means very soon we're going to make a huge deal out of the 200th temple.
Yeah. So we just got our 186th temple dedicated in Okinawa, as you said. Yeah, inching closer to 200. Yeah, Elder Gary Stevenson was there in Okinawa to dedicate the temple on November 12th. And they emphasized that they had one of the dedicatory sessions in Japanese and then the other one in English for primarily the native membership and the military membership.
Now does Elder Stevenson didn't do it in Japanese, right? He translated.
No, he did. He's a very fluent Japanese speaker.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and they emphasize that he's lived a total of 9 years of his life in Japan. He was 2 years as a missionary in Fukuoka and as well as Okinawa. Okinawa was one of his areas. Then he was 3 years as a mission president in Nagoya, and then he was 4 years in the Asia North area presidency.
Oh, wow.
Tokyo. So quite a fluent Japanese speaker, and he's aware of Japanese culture.
I think it's cool that we're doing it that way. You remember that general conference 4 or 5 years ago where we allowed people to speak in their native tongue, and that was a huge deal. And then we stopped doing it because, I don't know, people were like, English, we are an English church speaking. I don't know why we stopped doing it. I thought it was super cool.
You know, I think what happened was that they did more recordings in that native language. So if you listen to that general authority in the language that they know, you'll hear their voice speaking over themselves. So rather than just a generic translator, you'll actually hear their own voice. And so I know at least Elder Suarez and Elder Christofferson, they record their message in Spanish and they play that when they're speaking. And so I would not be surprised if other general authorities, that's what they do.
Yeah, I think it's cool that we're going the other way, but I really do. I miss that one. Maybe was it 2, but I think
there was 2.
One general conferences where they were like, yeah, here you go. And you could just tell the person felt comfortable and they were speaking in the language that was first for them. And everyone was like, I didn't know what that sounded like. And then we had empathy for the people that had to either have the delayed translation or had to read along. And it felt like we were all part of a big thing. And then the next one, we were like, English, do it in English. but cool. Very, very cool. That
I
he,
think it's probably hard to I think sync the subtitles to the speaker in the conference center.
I'm sure.
So
We have billions of dollars. This is a thing we can invest in a little bit of, all right? Just a little
okay.
bit. So that it feels more worldwide when when we go places and we're able to speak that language, and when we have general conference and they're able to speak the language that they're more comfortable in. What's the looks of the Okinawa temple? Do we feel like it's in Japan, or do we feel like it's transplanted from somewhere else and brought to Japan?
No, it's definitely a unique temple design. The aesthetics are pretty Japanese. As we talked about, they have the windows there that are like 3 panes of glass, and each different pane has a different art theme. And so as you like look, as the sun shines through that windows, it makes it basically looks different on the outside versus the inside, which is a very Okinawa tradition. I'd say they did a good job on this one.
Good. It gets the stamp of approval from the pharaoh.
What's interesting about this temple is that out of all the temple districts in the world, this is probably the smallest. There's no temple right now that only has 1 stake and 1 district of military members. And so, yeah, this is definitely a different sized temple, maybe a indication of what's to come in the future.
But my Karate Kid 2 would teach me it's an island.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Everyone on the island, but no one else, basically.
Yeah.
They said that there's 12 congregations and that about 2,000 people are regularly attending on a given Sunday. So if there's a total of 5,500 members, it's about a 36% activity rate. So sometimes you don't always get to see what the activity rate is from the church, and so that's an interesting insight. They emphasize that, or Elder Stevenson has always emphasized that Japan has a culture of temples, and that this culture has grafted on to the church and the church members. Church members have visited temples in Laie, and then when it was announced in Tokyo, and then the one in Fukuoka later, and now they have their own one in Okinawa. So
yeah, that's cool. When we talk about making them available for people so that they don't have to take a really long boat ride, a really expensive plane ride, all of these things. I mean, this is the epitome of that.
What's interesting, if you remember from General Conference a few years ago, Elder Stevenson talked about when he was serving on Okinawa that President Kimball came to Japan to visit, and that many of the members did go to Tokyo to see him, but something happened where the missionaries couldn't go, and so Elder Stevenson was left on the island.
No.
And that was the conference where Elder Kimball, or President Kimball, announced the Tokyo Temple. And so he just recounts people coming back to the island. We're very excited about that. So,
and that was the day that he swore when he could make a difference. And he took his staff and he grabbed it and drug it across the ground and said, "This is where we shall build a house of the Lord." Is that Brigham Young? Is that how they did it in Salt Lake?
Yeah, Elder Stevenson must have had his Brigham Young moment there in Okinawa.
Yes,
He said, "I'm going to dedicate this temple one day in 60 years.
I swear that one day," and it has to be in a voice that doesn't sound naturally his. All of the things. Manti was super cool that we got some news about the Manti Temple.
Yeah, the Manti Temple has been closed for about 2 years, and it will be open for an open house. They'll have a media day on March 11th, where we get to see the inside of the temple, and then there's an open house on March 14th to April 5th, 2024, and then the dedication will go ahead, or rededication, on April 21st.
And we have not yet heard the Minerva Teichert sort of wall paintings is not the word I'm looking for. The murals. We've not yet heard as to what the status, or not been able to see yet what the status of all those things are, right?
I mean, they said they preserved them, so they didn't release a lot of details, but like this renovation, it's the opposite of the Salt Lake renovation. They haven't released any details of what's going to happen on the inside, and so it will be interesting to see what they did.
Yeah,
because as we remember, there was that controversy when all the people in Manti petitioned the First Presidency to keep the murals after they said that they were going to remove them. And then they said, okay, well, actually, yeah, we'll keep them. And then we'll also build a temple in Ephraim. a few
The
minutes
Ephraim
nearby.
Temple, dedicated or not dedicated, but announced outside of General Conference. President Nelson going down to the Garden of Eden and just took a little, little side detour and was like, "Yeah, here, let's build a temple here."
Yeah, it's the only temple he's ever announced that's outside of General Conference.
Yeah, and we have. I know that this is not kind of, or maybe it is in conjunction with Manti. Do we have any sort of details about that? I know that they've. It seems like I've seen a partial build of the Ephraim Temple.
Yeah, definitely it's up, but it's probably still a year and a half away from being finished.
Cool. Well, very, very cool. I'll pick you up on my way when we go down to the Manti Temple.
Thanks. Yeah.
Carpool. I'll figure out a day that we can go, and I'll just and we'll get you.
Yeah, this is one of those you don't want to miss. With all the open houses happening in Utah, you may think, oh well, there's plenty of temples, but I mean, this one will be a once in a lifetime. So
we'll pick up Spencer Cox on the way as well.
In Fairfield.
Yeah, in Fairfield. Friend of mine, previous guest of the show. I'm gonna get the Pharaoh, and then we'll jet over and pick up, and we'll let Abby come too, his wife, first lady of the state of Utah. 4 of us. There will be singing in the car, so I hope that that's okay. I insist on it.
I guarantee you they'll be there at the media day.
Of course, 10,000%. Of course. What about the Kaohsiung, Taiwan?
Kaohsiung. Yeah. They held a groundbreaking for the Kaohsiung Taiwan temple on November 25th, that Thanksgiving weekend, but psych, in Taiwan there's no Thanksgiving, so just a normal weekend.
Yeah.
Elder Benjamin MZ Tai, he's the Asia area president. He was able to be the presiding authority on that, as well as the local mayor came to be part of that. So this is the second temple in the island of Taiwan. The other one in Taipei was dedicated in 1984. So this is great.
Wow.
Long time ago, members have traveled, took buses up to Taipei for a long time. So they have a nice plot of land right in the middle of the city. It's a very urbanized, like the buildings all around it are, large buildings and everything, but there's just this one like square of land right in the middle that has this field that's been waiting for a long time, and they're going to build a temple there.
Interesting. So maybe a look of like the Manhattan Temple, or
no, it's going to look like about the size of the Helena Temple. And it probably won't fit in the urban area, but it is interesting that you just have like these big apartment buildings all around it.
And then they're like, and the little temple.
Basically.
It's interesting to me that in something like that, because the church has built things that look and fit sort of the area, that they would decide to if not put it as part of a taller building or a more city building, that they'd just be like, and this here. Definitely distinct, I guess.
Yeah, I think just like the Okinawa temple, it has a nice Chinese design, and so yeah.
Okay, all right, I'll take it. And then the other thing that I noticed that you don't remark about in your notes, the dirt for that temple, because they bring in the dirt for the groundbreaking. It was like black. It was very dark dirt. I don't know. The picture, I'm like, wait a minute, because I've seen it before where you can tell it's very like,
oh yeah,
this is the softest topsoil that they could possibly find, and they brought it in so that people could shovel it over. But it looks sort of coarse and rocky, and also like almost like road base, as opposed to like this is the dirt that, I don't know. It struck me in the
maybe
picture. It's like, okay,
maybe it's volcanic rock. I don't know. Yeah, interesting.
Definitely. Okay. Well, I expect you to get a soil sampling. I want to know, when you go over there, get a scoop and send it to Utah State University so they can test your soil and tell you exactly why it is the way that it is. Those that know that Utah State does that get that. Everyone else is going, what is he talking about? 2 locations of temples announced. Let's talk about them.
Yeah. The Toluca, Mexico temple had the site was announced. It's a 5-acre site on the corner of Guadalupe Victoria and Urupan. And it's actually located in the town of Metepec. And this is interesting because Metepec is a pueblo mágico. which is a designation that the Mexican government gives to certain towns and cities in Mexico. There's about 150 of them. And it's to recognize some cultural or geographic significance to the area. But the program is really kind of a way to attract tourism to these small towns. And so all these small towns want to be Pueblo Mágicos because, attract tourists to come. And
Sure.
Metepec has a history. They have unique architecture. They have a nice Catholic church on this hill that you can climb up and everything. And so now this is the first temple that will be in a Pueblo Mágico.
That's pretty incredible. Do you think that we're going to lean into the, hey, come and see this unique thing in this Pueblo Mexico?
I don't know. We'll just see what the design looks like.
Well, is our site up on a hill too, so we can have a city with two hills, and it's choose ye this day which hill you will hike up?
No, it's a flat piece of land on a corner next to a rich housing development and Tech Millennial University. It's a single-story temple. It will be 19,000 square feet. It will be the first temple in the state of Mexico, which is the largest state in Mexico. And then interesting about Toluca is that recently the Tabernacle Choir came to Toluca during the summer and sang in the cathedral. And then Elder Bednar just like a month ago or a few weeks ago was there in Toluca.
So we had to get the deals finished.
Yeah.
We got everything.
So,
we're going to announce this. Is everything good? Yeah, we're good. Okay. I thought when I heard Toluca and saw that it had sort of hit the news a little bit that it was one of the places where the Tabernacle Choir sang. So that's cool.
Yeah, the other site was I think it's called the João Pessoa Temple in Brazil. This will be a 4-acre site on a pretty similar busy corner, but this one is adjacent to a river. Wow. And it's within a few blocks walking distance of the beach. Okay. And so it's called the Cabo Branco neighborhood. And so there's a lot of very tall buildings around there. It's a nice area. Similarly, it will be about a temple of 19,000 square feet. So if you're one of those people, and I know there are, that like to travel to various destinations and make the temple a part of their trip. There are some people who make it the whole of their trip, but you want to make it a part of the trip. Like that Brazil temple, once it's constructed, dedicated, and functioning, seems like the place to go, right? You go down, it's like the beautiful neighborhood. The beach is a few steps away. Save some of our ancestry, go back to the beach. Continue the work for them, then go back to the beach. Like that sounds like a pretty great vacation. Yeah, could be. The one I would maybe put above Brazil. Sorry, Brazilian listeners of the churches. Go to Spain, to Barcelona, a place I've always wanted to go to, and we have a temple that will be there as well. Yeah. Previously, they had announced that the temple will be where the temple will be built, and now they released a rendering. And this is a 2-story temple of 27,500 square feet. Initially, I thought this would be a design that was more like the Montpellier temple or some of the other 2-story temples that we've been seeing in Latin America. But this one is closer to like the Lisbon, Portugal temple or the Antofagasta, Chile temple. It's kind of like it's a little bit more like the Feather River temple. It's just a little bit smaller. But yeah, it has that long kind of design, has a lot of arches on the windows. I think the temple looks, they took a lot of Gothic and Moorish themes. And so you see that the arches are kind of pointed, and that's something you see a lot in Gothic churches around Spain and Europe. And you see kind of those quatrefoils textured on the walls of the temple, which could be Gothic, but also you see a lot on the Moorish kind of Muslim architecture of the area. So well, good. I'm glad that we went in and said, hey, let's make this look like what the area looks like, as opposed to, well, we did one in Helena, right? Can we do that? Can we ship one of those down here? Can we put that on a boat? You also see this in Barcelona. A lot of people speak Catalan. And so it says the rendering has Holiness to the Lord, House of the Lord written first in Catalan, and then in Spanish. And so very cool. If Catalan ever does get its independence, the temple will be ready for that. Wow. And now it's not necessarily a temple, but we lump a lot of things into the temple ticker because, well, we can.
and we get to pick. And when you get your own show, you can make your own rules. But so long as you're listening to our show, you have to follow by our rules. Did your parents ever do that to you?
Yep.
Growing up? When you get your own house. We're going to talk about the visitor center in Nauvoo. Super cool.
Yeah, the church went before the city council and they approved the new visitor center. It will be kind of not, I will be in front of where the temple is, but a little bit to the side, closer to where the Catholic Church is, kind of in between the temple and the Catholic Church. The design is not 100% finished. They'll have to go back to the council when that's done. But yeah, they got their approval to go ahead and start the design process. And they've previously agreed to share the parking lot with the Catholic Church and to make some traffic improvements to the area. The visitor center will have, they said, some nice kind of like stained glass that has pictures of the Savior and everything. And so, yeah.
One of the great parts is they're putting in a mess of caves that you can make your way underground through Nauvoo. You can find your way into what they think might be Joseph's tomb that was built. Listen to that episode of the Cultural Hall. And then I was listening to, and I can't remember, I wish I could properly credit this, but I was listening to something that allow me a little bit of leniency in what I'm about to talk about, because these are not my words. These were someone else's words, but they were like, they wanted to create an experience in Nauvoo so that people could understand what it was like for the saints. And so, as many people will know, Joseph and Hiram were buried, and then in the middle of the night, they had to be exhumed and then moved. And so this person was like, let's make the entire thing of Nauvoo interactive. And you know, some people are trying to catch the people that are trying to move, and the you know, Joseph and Hiram and all of these things. And sure, it's a little like I don't know how I feel about this, but when you think about all of the things that happened in Nauvoo, the idea of a little bit more like interactive, sort of set you in the time kind of thing, there was a little part of me that was like, that would be a unique experience, maybe at worst, but maybe like a, you know, just kind of a I can't believe all this happened sort of experience at best.
Yeah, we could recreate the Battle of Nauvoo.
Yeah, see?
Way after Brigham Young left and some of the saints were left behind, there was like people that were being fired on by cannons and driven out of the city.
You could
Iowa
learn how
plain.
you could learn how to drain the
Swamp.
land there before it was even inhabitable, you know.
Like it.
All of the things. And then I think as part of it, we have to teach everyone the City of Joseph song. Do you know the City of Joseph song?
No, I don't.
You don't?
No.
Oh, as far as I know, it used to be a part of the Nauvoo pageant, but it is no longer, because the
Okay.
song used to go, City of Joseph, city beautiful, City of Joseph, Nauvoo, City of Joseph, city beautiful, City of Joseph, Nauvoo. And then I don't remember the next part of it, but then it's interactive between the people singing and the people witnessing, and they go, they drained it, maintained it. And it obviously was probably a little bit too devotional towards Joseph Smith. So we went, let's do something else as far as all this goes. But one of my favorite tracks that we've lost within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the City of Joseph.
So I'll have to ask my grandparents, because they, about 15 years ago, they served a mission in Nauvoo.
Okay.
And they're in the Masonic Lodge. They had this little play that they did for a while. And they're like, I don't think we're not really song and dance people, but they did it and they learned the lyrics. So
that's awesome. That's incredible. Yes, ask them and find out. Let's move to some controversy, some places that have had a little bit of shine time in the headlines. Heber Valley.
yeah, there's some simmering coals from the controversy in Heber and Cody. There was a new amended lawsuit that, as we talked about, that Dark Skies group was pursuing. They're accusing the county of breaking some of the open records requests and not giving them the information they need for their lawsuit. And so they said there might be an effort to gather signatures to create a referendum to see if they can put the temple's approval on the ballot. So,
which, if you did not listen to episode, I think it's 740 of the Cultural Hall, we talked with one of the council, or not, he's not one of the council members. He's like the city planner. He's this, I don't know, episode 740. Go watch or listen to that, because this guy talks all about that. The process, why it is that it got approved, blah, 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 blah. But I know several people have really appreciated that. And I think he makes mention to the fact that there could be a referendum that would put it on the ballot.
Yeah, pretty similar in Cody. Actually really similar is that there's basically the party that's trying to prevent the temple from being built said that they're trying to add evidence. They already kind of gathered the evidence phase, and once you're in a court of law, you basically add all the evidence and then you say, okay, we're all done with that. We're going to now consider it on the merits. But basically some evidence came in late because there was a public record request that was 72 days overdue. And so they're saying, hey, we should be able to add this to the evidence, but they're kind of saying, well, we're already done with that. And so we'll have to see what goes on with that.
Yeah, it's like 4,000 records, the headline of the Cody Journal or Cody Herald or whatever. It's like, the LDS Church doesn't want 4,000 records to be allowed into the case. So
what's probably what's more accurate is that the lawyer for the church doesn't want this, because the lawyer is trying to basically, win the case. And so you don't want more evidence against you.
Sure.
Yeah.
But they may, as I understand, though, they made the request 72 days or, more than 72 days ago, right? And then they were like, hey, get this. And they're like, we'll get it's coming. It's coming. We'll get it to you. Okay, here it is. And now it feels like it's too late.
Yeah, with this court of law stuff, you have to realize that the lawyers have a duty to argue everything that they can for their client. And so that's just, what their argument is, and the judge will consider whether it has merits.
Austin, the groundbreaking of the Austin Temple?
Question mark, because a local media source says that the temple will start in mid-2024, maybe June, and that it'll take about 2 years to be constructed. And so the church has not said when there'll be a groundbreaking for this temple, but if this journalist is correct, it will be June of next year.
So the very thing that people come to the temple ticker for, which is reading between the lines and reading the local press, Corey K. Ward is now telling you maybe June-ish for the Austin Temple. See, that's what we come here for, sir. That's what we come here for. How about Orem? The Orem, Utah Temple, the open house ongoing right now. Have you gone?
I have, and I can offer my review if you want.
Please.
So I think they did a good job of funneling people in and out for this temple versus the Saratoga Springs Temple. The Saratoga Springs Temple, they brought you to the church, they made you watch a video, and then you could go to the temple. But this one, I think they assumed that most people had either recently gone to that open house or were members of the church. And so they decided we're not going to have them watch the open house video. And here's some QR codes if you're interested. But
oh, cool. Okay.
So it is a lot more in and out. However, unlike Saratoga Springs, the parking lot of the temple is, I guess, not big enough to accommodate everyone that wants to come, especially on a weekend. And so there's basically 4 different churches around the Orem area where you come and you just hop on a shuttle and they'll bring you over. The one that's the closest that I think most use is the one next to the WWII Stake Center that's next to the Front Runner Station. That's where I was. The shuttles come like every 5 minutes or 2 minutes or whatever. So pretty easy to get in and out of the temple. Yeah, and the temple is of course a little bit smaller than Saratoga Springs. It takes a little bit shorter time to go around. But yeah, I liked it.
Great, unique artwork. Anything from the inside that you went, oh, I didn't expect a yellow this, orange that, 10 of those things or whatever.
I wasn't too surprised about what I've already seen on the photographs. But I do really like the art, the stained glass that's in there. As we talked about, the Utah Lake baptistry with the windows and the birds there, and then all through the temple there's those cherry tree windows. So yeah.
Do they make any remarks in the tour about the fire?
No. And in fact, unlike Saratoga Springs, this is actually another thing. In Saratoga Springs, they had someone stationed in each of the major rooms to kind of give an explanation, and they just kind of repeated themselves as people went through. There was no one that repeated themselves as you're going through. So if you wanted to ask a question, you could ask someone. But I think the open house people, considering that it's Utah, I think that if you're a non-member that's unfamiliar with the temple, I think that you're most likely to be with someone that will be there explaining things as you walk through. And so I think it's a lot better way of just having him basically be open to how you want to tour the temple. And if I assume that if you have a friend with you, that they'll explain things to you as you go through. So
yeah, when my wife and I went to the Helena Temple, walk through, I remember so you went to the Stake Center first, and that's where you watch the video, and then you walk across the parking lot, and then you're able to go through the thing. And I remember, there's a dozen of us in the room, and it's very clear that all of us are members of the church, except for my wife, and though I'm sure everyone assumed that she was as well. But there's like this thing where we're sitting and watching, and we're like, we're sort of looking around the room, and we're like, we all know this, right? Like, could we have been given the option of like, we aren't a member, we are a member, let's get to this, that kind of thing. But then part of the film, and I can't remember what it is, but there's sort of that part like what we used to do on Temple Square at Christmas, where it's like, and so if you know anyone who's not a member of the church, and and then you sort of look around the room and it's weighted, and it's like, babe, I'm not going to tell them. Don't worry. We're good. We'll just go through the temple. But I mean, I get why we do it, but it's definitely a thing I just was like, well, I don't know. Just let me through. St. George now on its way to being rededicated. We're in the cleaning part right now.
Yeah, the open house concluded. 670,000 people attended this temple. Various open house. Jeez. Considering that the population of the St. George area is only 200,000, a lot of people came in to see this temple, including on the last day, a centenarian couple came in. He's 102, she's 101, and it had been sealed 80 years ago in 1943. They still have their certificate of that. I mean, this is the same age as my great grandparents that passed away 10 years ago. So it's pretty amazing that they got to go back to the temple.
Yeah, so cool. And you get to see the pictures of them, and they are every bit sweet as two centenarians who've been sealed in the temple 80 years ago, who get to go, like it is so great, and it is the epitome of like one of those feel good, we love this temple coming back kind of stories. It was fun to read, and you can read that obviously in the show notes.
Yeah, if you're more interested about the history of the temple, there's the Church News put out a podcast with a church historian called The Legacy of the St. George Temple. A few things I learned is that the temple was only completed in 6 years. They were able to work during the winter, unlike in Salt Lake, where they had to kind of take a break when it was super cold. And the temple was dedicated in phases, so that when they completed the baptistry, they could start baptisms. When they completed the endowment rooms, they could start endowments. And so the dedication kind of took part over 6 years because different apostles dedicated different parts of the temple.
Interesting. So, did they dedicate the essentially hotel rooms as well, or did we not do that? I thought that was the most fascinating thing about the St. George Temple when I went through. The reason why there's so many ceiling rooms and most of them are super small is because the saints would be like, listen, I came down here. I need a place to stay. Stay in the temple.
Perhaps, yeah.
Yeah, cool.
But yeah, they just kind of used it as it was being finished. And so, we rededicated on December 10th.
And so cool to see Elder Holland and his health rally to where he's going to do it. I know so many people probably praying for him to have the opportunity to do that. His health a little bit rough, but I can't remember where we last sort of saw Elder Holland. He made a public thing. It wasn't General Conference that we were like, oh, his health is rallied.
Yeah, he spoke at the funeral of Russell Ballard.
That's what it was. And people were like, whoa, Elder Holland, he's healthy. He's great.
Yeah, and not only that, he said that when he was in the hospital for 5 weeks, 3 of those weeks were when he was unconscious and kind of on the death's door is what he said. Jeez. And so he said that Elder Ballard was he always called the hospital to see how he was doing and everything. And so now, and of course now he's President Holland. He's back to being President Holland.
Yeah. Yeah.
acting president from the 12th. And so they're just announced that he will be at the dedication.
Cool. Very cool. And that's the 10th of December. So coming up here pretty quick. We've got a few more minutes and a lot of stuff to get through. Let's do it.
Well, you may be interested to know about, President Nelson has emphasized that different apostles should be dedicating temples rather than him doing all of them, kind of like President Hinckley did. And this will be President Holland has never dedicated a temple. He's
Cool.
rededicated the Memphis temple, but this will be the second rededication that he's done. If you just look at the stats, President Nelson has dedicated 3 and rededicated 3. Same with Oakes, who's rededicated 2 and dedicated 3. Ballard, he got to dedicate the Pocatello temple, and then he had 3 rededications. Eyring, when he was most of this is when he was in the first presidency with President Monson, he dedicated 8 temples and rededicated 8. And then Uchtdorf dedicated 11 and has rededicated 3.
Wow.
So far, Elder Bednar has done 4 dedications, Elder Cook 2 dedications, 1 rededication, Christofferson 2 dedications and 1 rededication, and then Anderson 3 dedication, Rasband 2, Stevenson 3, Renlund 2. Elder Gong has rededicated the Hung Hong temple, and then he's had 1 rededication. And then Elder Suarez has done 3. So as you can see, about as they've gone around the 12 and had everyone dedicate, that's about what they're at right now.
I wonder if it's like that. When we talk about like mission service and it's like they all get in a room and they pray about each name. That's how we sort of envision this in our mind. Or at least that's how it did when I got my call. Like, I feel like now they're probably like, listen, who's going to be around this area? You're going over here. Can you, and it's your turn. Do you have any connection? You don't? Do anyone have a connection to this? Okay. You're doing it, Elder so-and-so.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. All right.
But I hope that's hopefully they plan their visit around the dedication, not just we'll do it on our way.
Yeah. Okay. Or they get assigned and then they plan the things around it. Either way, it doesn't have to be as designated and specific as I sometimes think it is. It's the season for Christmas lights, so we can get through some of the places that have Christmas lights. People can go make a destination to go see.
Yeah. The temples that will have big light displays are the Hamilton, New Zealand temple. There's also the Philippines temple that had a big lighting ceremony this past few weeks. Oakland, California, they're going to have a lot of events at their stake center right there. They call it, I can't remember what they call it, but they basically call the area Temple Hill. And so they're going to have concerts and everything. They're going on. In Mesa, they have Christmas lights and a 200 nativity displays at the visitor center. And then Washington, D.C., Elder Renlund was there recently with someone from the embassy of the Philippines to basically participate in the lighting event there at the visitor center. It seems like this is a tradition now where they have an apostle and some sort of ambassador type person come and do this event. So it's kind of a yearly tradition. And then, of course, there's Temple Square in Salt Lake City.
And in the show notes, you can see it because it's not like how it used to be. And the article, as I read it, did you read it and see it to assume that it will never go back to how it was?
Never? What do you mean?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, well, so they're renovating Temple Square. So obviously it's not going to look like how it used to. So that's not what I'm talking about. But you can remember 20 years ago when there were, we would say there's like 5 million lights or something crazy. And then people were like, this isn't that healthy for the trees. So we sort of pared it back a little bit. And then as I read that article, it's like it will never be anything near that ever again.
Okay.
That's
yeah,
how
I think
I read it. I wondered if you read the article that same way, or if you were like, nah, we just don't want to deal anything with it until we get everything else set, and then we'll go back to it.
I think we'll see what happens when it comes, I guess.
Yeah.
From the pictures I see that they so one area is by the conference center. They have a lot of like those artificial trees that are lit. Also in between the church history or the church history museum and the family history library, they have a really cool like snowflakes that are projected onto the ground. So that's
Cool.
a place you can go. And then the new area where they just completed, that's just south of the church office building. That will be a new area where you can go and see whatever displays they have.
Mother, tell me the story about how this grand used to flood into the parking area. All right, sit down. I will tell you. Because in the year 2020, they stopped it and were able to make it so it didn't leak anymore. This was cool. The 4 temples are on the 20 most peaceful tourist places in the United States.
Yeah, number 4 was Idaho Falls, number 11 Oakland, number 13 St. George, and number 16 Mesa. And so they said that they had a national survey, but what really they did is they went onto TripAdvisor and they looked at all the reviews and they said, how many of these reviews say the word peaceful in it? They counted those up and ranked them, and they found that 4 temples are on the top 20 list.
A question that you aren't prepared for, because I doubt it has anything to do with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Do you know what the number one was?
I can look it up. I don't know if you have it pulled up, but
I can pull that up as you're telling us about a recommendation.
Well, actually, I have it right here. It's the National Shrine of Our Lady at Laie at Mission Nombre de Dios in St. Augustine, Florida.
Okay.
So,
but now I'd like you to talk to us about a recommendation.
Yeah, there's a great new podcast that's been out for a few months called Angels and Seer Stones. I think 2 previous guests of the Culture Hall, Christopher Blythe and Christine Blythe. They had an episode this past month about Jesus appearing in the temple. And so it's a temple about folklore and about kind of the stories that we tell ourselves. They're not out to debunk any of these stories. They're just kind of trying to explain like where are these stories coming from, what context are they in, and what do they tell us about ourselves as a people. And so they had an interesting story. They had some stories about people having, those phone calls where the temple president tells them that someone was here tonight late in the temple and stuff like that. So very interesting.
Small bone to pick with previous guests of the Culture Hall, the Blythes. I asked them to come and do sort of a urban myth thing, a folklore within the church episode, specifically Christine. And they sort of put me off a little bit, and then they started doing the Angels and Seer Stones, and I was like, listen, so if I had that idea, or they most likely had that idea years and years before, I just wanted to have one where it's like, let's just talk about a few of them. And then that podcast came out, and it's great. They do a great job. It's not to disparage them at all, but I am a little bit like, hey, well, we talked about this years ago. I just wanted to have one episode where you came on and said, we thought this, and now you've got this whole thing. And of course, people will listen to where you can dedicate a whole episode to these different things. Fine, Blythe, it's fine.
I'm sure they would have to be guests again because they want to promote their podcast.
I hope so. I'm going to hit them up again and say that you thought that they would want to. I should also tell you this, because all the stories I just copy and paste in the show notes. You have that podcast called Angles and Seer Stones.
Oh no.
if you want to make sure and change that before I copy and paste it so that everyone can find that podcast. And then the last thing, you have a little extra as we wrap out the temple ticker.
Yeah, a little bit non-temple, temple adjacent. The church, the First Presidency recently approved changes to how church units are created. So basically, for any new stakes that are being created around the world, they'll have a kind of new requirement. And that is that they should have, basically, the US and Canada used to have, or US and Canada and then other countries used to have different requirements. And now those are eliminated. Now they are all around the world. Every church unit will have the same requirements. So previously in the United States and Canada, you had to have 3,000 members, total members, to have a stake. Now you only need 2,000. Before you had to have 180 active Melchizedek priesthood holders. Now you only need 150. But in other countries, it was 120. So you're kind of bringing up the rest of the world to this standard, and you're now bringing down the US and Canada down to this standard. And so also in a ward, you need at least basically 20 active members, Melchizedek holders, and a total of a total of 250 members, and then about 100 of those adults need to be active. There's also new recommendations about how many youth should be in each ward. So this will be just interesting in the long run to see what happens if maybe church the unit growth will slow in the rest of the world because they have to reach up to these standards.
Sure.
And then if in the US of Canada, if there'll be more stakes created, more branches events towards, we'll just see about that. So, I mean, this kind of, I think affects temple building because as you see, the number of church units in an area, the number of stakes kind of is one of those metrics that are looked at. So we'll just see in the long run how this will change.
I wonder if it'll affect my stake. It's interesting because the way that like the stake boundaries are for my particular stake, I live in the west side of the Salt Lake Valley, like it sort of makes sense, but the way that the wards are divided within our stake, it's like, and we'll grab a little over here, and then we're gonna have this part over here, whereas there's a very like distinct geographical boundary that could be drawn that would be like, yeah, okay, so then I'm in the ward with my neighbors over there, great. That would seem to make geographical sense to me, but the way that it's divided now, it's like, and we'll go over here, but and this is a discussion for a different time because we're wrapping this thing out, but it's fascinating. So they did like a change in my particular ward because I guess some things changed 20 25 years ago that they needed to or they had to or they chose to or whatever. And speaking to various members of the leadership now who were in the ward and or stake at that time, they were like, there are several people that never came back to church.
Yeah, that certainly happens when there's any type of reshuffle. I know that I've listened to this, some evangelicals on a podcast talk about whenever you have a change in habits of church meeting, of like when you meet or where you meet or who you meet with, it's just easy to go between the cracks and to not come back. And so that's certainly a consideration that leaders should have.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're done. It's the Temple Ticker. You can find it every once in a while where we share only the news. Well, I say that and then I look at all the stuff that we talked about. It's mostly the news of the Temple of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Corey K. Ward, the Pharaoh himself, thank you so much for all the research that you do. Tell people again the thing that you do on Facebook where people can check it out, and we'll make sure that that's in the show notes as well.
Yeah, it's called Latter-day Saint Chapels Around the World Daily. If you want to see what the church looks like around the world, go there.
And you can follow, and you do that not every day, but every week.
Every day.
You do it 7 days a week?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were only 5 of 7. Good for you. Good for you. And that, funnily enough, of all of the responses that I've gotten to the Temple Ticker, that's the thing that people ask the most about. They're like, sure, okay, temples and places, sure. What's the Facebook page that he does?
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So that's exciting that people are finding and following that. Corey, we hope that this episode has nourished and strengthened your body.
We hope that if you're able to listen this week, that you'll be able to listen next week or whenever we do this.
And that when the time comes, you will be able to travel home in safety. In the meantime, we'll be saving a seat for you
on the back row
of the Cultural Hall.